Greetings to all in the love and light of the one infinite creator, and welcome to the Seattle Law of One podcast. Today's episode is about Atlantis. Few places on Earth have captivated our imaginations as much as Atlantis. Though still viewed as an imaginary place by most people, it is clear from studying the Law of One that Atlantis was an actual place that has had a huge impact not only on Earth's past, but on its present as well, up to and including the present day. What happened in Atlantis exactly, and how can our understandings of its history help us in our individual and collective lives today? Let's find out. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found in the list of study groups on the L&L Research website shown on your screen. We do also have a Facebook group, and we do meet on Zoom twice a week, Tuesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time, and Saturdays 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You can just contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com to get on our mailing list. We send out weekly updates to let you know what we are doing that week, along with the Zoom links. We do also have a YouTube channel where we keep recordings of our podcast episodes, as well as recordings of Q&A sessions with Jim McCarty, Austin Bridges, Gary Bean, and Trisha Bean from the L&L Research channeling team. I encourage you to subscribe to our channel to get notifications, and we do divide each podcast episode into chapters, so you can skip from chapter to chapter if you don't want to watch the whole thing through from beginning to end. If you're watching on your computer or phone, you can also find a list of topics and timestamps down below if you want to skip through at your own pace. Otherwise, as mentioned, the topic for today's podcast episode is Atlantis. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists. Panelists, if you would let our viewers know who you are and where you're calling from, that would be awesome. Starting with Anthony.
Yeah, my name is Anthony Johnson. I am calling from Washougal, Washington.
Nice. And Chloe.
Hi guys, my name's Chloe Trujillo. I'm calling from Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Nice. And Heather.
And my name is Heather Stubbs, and I am in Seattle, Washington.
Nice. Well, I'm so delighted to have the three be joining us today, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. For our viewers, just want to remind you that none of us here are experts or authorities on the Law of One or on Atlantis. We're just normal people like you, hanging out, sharing our thoughts and opinions on things that we consider to be significant spiritually. Anything we say could be wrong. You're welcome to disagree with anything or everything that any of us say. Let's get started, shall we? Unlike previous podcasts today, we are going to assume that if you are watching this, you are already familiar with the Law of One and the entities known as Ra and Kuo. If that is not the case, you might want to go back and watch any of the last 3 or 4 podcast episodes. We do have brief introductions and overviews in the first few chapters that will give you some background on that. You could also watch the second podcast episode called Law of One 101. Which gives you an overview of everything. But today, before we talk about Atlantis, there are 2 other civilizations that we need to talk about first, and that is Maldek and Mars. For those who didn't know this, according to our friends in the Confederation, what we call the asteroid belt is in fact the remains of a planet that was blown up by its third density population through bellicosity and war about 700,000 years ago. This population thought that they were service to others, but their actions were more service to self, leading to said bellicosity and war. The inhabitants have been reincarnated on Earth in order to alleviate the karma of having blown up their home planets and to allow them to resume growth towards graduation and harvest. In session 10, question 1, Ra said, the peoples of Maldek had a civilization somewhat similar to that of the societal complex known to you as Atlantis, and that it gained much technological information and used it without care for the preservation of their sphere, following to a majority extent the complex of thought, ideas, and actions which you may associate with your so-called negative polarity or the service to self. This was, however, for the most part, couched in a sincere belief, thought structure, which seemed to the perception of the mind-body complexes of this sphere to be positive and of service to others. The devastation that racked their biosphere and caused its disintegration resulted from what you call war. About Mars, according to our friends in the Confederation, Mars did in fact have life on it at one point, but it was rendered uninhabitable by its third density inhabitants, also through bellicosity, war, and its effects on their atmosphere and their biosphere. The Martian population apparently was genetically modified and transplanted to Earth about 75,000 years ago by a guardian named Yahweh. Guardians, we could have a whole nother episode on that. Suffice it to say, guardians are in the inner planes and they are spiritual guardians of our planet. One of them was named Yahweh. And again, there's a long history of Mars, which we will get into in another episode. But this transplant and genetic modification was determined to be a violation of the free will of the Martian population. Hence, a quarantine was put in place, limiting the opportunities for positive and negative entities outside of Earth to influence humanity's development. On November 10th, 2022, Quo said, "The bellicose attitudes and the intention of aggression and harm between various populations on the planet of Mars led to a scenario in which there was a gradual decline in the biosphere due to literal destruction of ecosystems. This gradual decline was exacerbated as energies escalated and weaponry and attitudes became far more destructive in nature as the desire for destruction grew. Thus, you may see a slow decline of both ecosystem and population for a matter of time that eventually concluded with a singular event that spawned a much quicker decline, that being what you would experience as a matter of months because of weaponry that disrupted a certain aspect of the planetary ecosystem, being that life-giving force of water and the cycle of water. Through this disruption of the cycle of water, there was a chain of events that unfolded in which the ecosystem itself deteriorated and the soul of the planet, as you may understand it, faded, thus resulting in a deterioration of what you would recognize as a magnetosphere, thus solidifying the lack of ability of life to again take grasp upon this planet. We reiterate that this catalyst of destruction is continuing to be processed and explored upon your own planet and within your own population, and you may draw correlations between what you witness upon your planet currently and its relationship to the planet as an ecosystem and what unfolded upon the red planet. Long passage there, sorry for putting that on, but I think, again, you will see many more references to Maldek and Mars in the passages that we read about Atlantis because their histories are kind of tied together. And I would think anyone reading through these passages like me would be struck at how well they seem to describe our situation on Earth right now, including our degradations of our own atmosphere and our own biosphere and our own obsessions with war and bellicosity and aggression and service to self behaviors couched in service to others rhetoric. It seems to be describing our planet to a T. Did want to ask our panelists if anyone has any thoughts on anything here regarding Maldek and Mars. Anthony, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, I would just expand on what you had just said, is that, a lot of the bellicosity that we see here now in our own society, with all of the people warring and fighting over land and property and food, it can all be, in a sense, most of it can kind of be tied to those souls who Scott Maldek always calls a 3D repeaters, right? These souls that are constantly going through this cycle and have not yet gotten it. And we see it repeated in Mars and then in Atlantis and now in the new Atlantis, which we see as our new civilization.
For sure. Yeah, well said. Chloe, anything to add? Any thoughts?
Yeah, just, they mentioned water in here and the cycle of water being disrupted. And, just wanted to quickly mention how it seems whenever we take it for granted, nature, ecosystems, the way things naturally function, when we push against that, it tends to come back at us eventually. And you can kind of see how it happened there on Mars and how it is currently happening on Earth.
For sure. Yeah, and I don't think they necessarily pointed to the atmosphere specifically in this passage, but I know there was another channeling session where the question was asked about what happened on Mars, and they did mention the atmosphere specifically, which really, I mean, certainly makes me wonder how similar or different our situation is here regarding climate change and atmospheric things that have led to the hurricane that we saw wipe out the town of Asheville and western North Carolina and other states recently. Heather, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, I would just reiterate it's this pattern that we're looking at where, the surface of Mars was destroyed, and then the entire planet of Maldek was destroyed, and then all of those souls, were transplanted to Atlantis, and in hopes for, creating some sort of harvest or a greater harvest, and that wasn't able to be achieved then, and so here we are now, still watching the same patterns play out.
Yeah, it's like a cosmic Groundhog Day. Yeah, speaking of patterns, I couldn't help noticing as I was preparing the slides for this episode, if you look at the diagram of the solar system, it's like there's a trend starting with Maldek. You've got a planet that was completely blown to bits through warfare. You've got next moving in towards the sun. You've got Mars, a planet that was not blown to bits, but rendered uninhabitable, again, through bellicosity and war. You've got Earth, which has its own issues with warfare and bellicosity. And then you have Venus, a planet that apparently had a very peaceful, harmonious evolution quickly through third and fourth density. And whereas Mars is, associated with the Greek god of war, Venus is associated with the Greek god of love. And then you've got Mercury. I don't know what to make out of Mercury, but then you've got the sun, which is kind of like the original sub-logos source of love and light, literally, for our logos. So it seems like the farther you move away from our sun, the more you get into war and bellicosity. The closer you move to our sun, the closer you get to love and harmony. I just think that's fascinating. And here we are, planet Earth, we're kind of caught between Venus and Mars, caught between love and war, and that's what leaves us in the third density of choice, I suppose, to choose what kind of world we want to live in. Do we want to live in a world of love or a world of war? That's kind of the choice we're given. Does anybody else have any other thoughts, questions to share before we take a look at our first passage on Atlantis? Sounds good. Let's see, I am going to exit out of a slideshow, and so let's begin with an overview of Atlantis. I have one passage that I wanted to look at first, and this was from the Raw Contact. This was session 10, question 15. And Ross said, "The Atlantean race was a very conglomerate social complex which began to form approximately 31,000 years in the past of your space-time continuum illusion. It was a slow-growing and very agrarian society until approximately 15,000 of your years ago." I'm shortening this a little bit. "It reached quickly a high technological understanding which caused it to be able to use intelligent infinity in a less informative manner. We may add that they used intelligent energy as well, manipulating greatly the natural influxes of the indigo or pineal ray from divine or infinite energy. Thus, they were able to create life forms. This they began to do instead of healing and perfecting their own mind-body-spirit complexes, tuning their distortions towards what you may call the negative. Approximately 11,000 of your years ago, the first of the what you call wars caused approximately 40% of this population to leave the density by means of disintegration of the body. The second and most devastating of the conflicts occurred approximately 10,821 years in the past, according to your illusion. This created an earth-changing configuration, and the large part of Atlantis was no more, having been inundated. 3 of the positively oriented of the Atlantean groups left this geographical locus before that devastation, placing themselves in the mountain areas of what you call Tibet, what you call Peru, and what you call Turkey. Just want to stop there to talk a little bit about this part. Remember that part in blue about using intelligent energy to create life forms, because we are going to come back to that later. You're going to hear a little bit more about that. But for now, yeah, I think the part that's most fascinating to me is the positively oriented Atlanteans that fled to Tibet and Peru and Turkey. In the case of Tibet, I mean, anyone who knows anything about Tibetan Buddhists could say, yes, there's definitely a mystical element to that society that would not be surprising to be tied to Atlantis. And Peru as well, Machu Picchu and Pumapunku and the Nazca Plains. There's all sorts of interesting stuff that's happened in Peru and in nearby Bolivia that would explain that. Turkey, a little bit less clear. I am not real clear on what exactly in Turkey can be traced to Atlantis, other than perhaps the underground cities that have been discovered there. And I suppose the Ottoman Empire, which is one of the largest empires in world history, I guess could be that Atlantean group gone bad. Anyone else have any thoughts on any of this stuff? Chloe, any thoughts on this passage in particular?
Yes, I also had those exact same thoughts when I read it initially, that, I did have associations with service to others, positively oriented energy in Tibet and Peru, but I didn't really have that association with Turkey, so I appreciate your theories for what could have happened there. Perhaps they took, they say when you have polarity built up in service to self or service to others, it's easy to kind of switch because there's so much energy built up behind it already.
That's a good observation. That's a good point. Yeah. I had not thought of it that way, but that makes perfect sense. Heather, any thoughts on anything from this passage?
Just pointing out that 11,000 years ago, give or take, they blew up 40% of Atlantis, and then probably like 1,200 years after it, then they blew up the rest of it. So yeah, interesting. Like I'd call that a world war, right? So two separate world wars to blow up their planet.
Yeah, and it's really kind of hard to wrap your head around it when our scale of time is so skewed differently. I mean, this country, the United States, seems like it's been around a long time, but I mean, it's only been a little more than 200 years. And you're talking about thousands of years in this case. It's really kind of hard to comprehend that scale of time. Anthony, any thoughts on anything here?
Yeah, well, as far as with Turkey, that's where Göbekli Tepe is, which is one of the oldest archaeological sites there. So more than likely that is from the Atlanteans that had left from the disaster, the devastation. One thing I would point out that I think is very promising is that it says that the 3 of the positive-oriented Atlantean groups, they were able to leave before the destruction. So maybe if we're more positively orientated in our practice, that as these, predicted destructions happen, that, as it has happened in my life, I find myself needing to move and finding myself called to go to new locations, only to find out later that wherever I was at before is now in more, trials and tribulations if I would have stayed. And so that gives me promise to know that, hey, if the ones upstairs can look out for the Atlantean groups, maybe they look out for the LNL group and the rest of the people out there that are positively orientated.
That's a great reminder for all of us to meditate and try to be in tune, to be able to pick up those messages and clues when we get them, and to continue to dedicate our lives as much as we can to service to others, if that's our path. Speaking of Tibet, I did want to take a little break here to do a couple other book recommendations. I'm sure everyone on this panel and everyone watching this has read or learned about Atlantis from other sources as well. And there were a couple books that I've read that I think might be worth mentioning to viewers who might be interested. The first one is called The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis. The author is a person named John Penniel, who seems to have had firsthand experience living in a spiritual community in Tibet that is most definitely descended from those positively oriented Atlanteans. It's a really good book. I have read it myself. Several folks in our study group have read it and agree that it seems to affirm everything that our friends of the Confederation said about Atlantis, as well as going a lot more in depth into it. Edgar Cayce, of course, known as the Sleeping Prophet, also wrote a lot about Atlantis. And in a couple of his prophecies, he did actually specifically identify a person named John Penniel, who's going to bring messages about the oneness of the Father as God. And was going to proclaim the year of the Lord in him that had been born in earth in America. So there was that mention as well. Edgar Cayce, of course, again, has written a lot about Atlantis, said a lot about Atlantis that's been recorded. Dolores Cannon also was a person who did hypnotic regression therapy and has many accounts of people who are describing their experiences in Atlantis, which again, all of which is pretty well affirmed by what we've read in the L&L channelings, but goes into a lot more depth and a lot more details, and definitely does not present a particularly flattering image of Atlanteans. That also is a book that I have read personally and would highly recommend. Panelists, did anybody else have any other Atlantis sources they wanted to recommend for our viewers?
I would just say there's a gentleman named Rudolph Stein who has some really interesting information on Atlantis, and I always thought it was kind of had some correlations, not all of it, but I found it interesting.
Nice. Heather?
I will say that some of the information that I've got from like Debbie Solaris and the people who channel the Galactic Akashic records, they share some information. Of course, Atlantis comes up quite frequently. But interesting on, kind of looking at the different timelines, Ra has Lemuria before Atlantis, and that collapsed just due to like an earthquake. But in some of the other teachings, it said that they both existed at the same time on the planet. So I find it interesting to kind of see the two different timelines.
Yeah, and I have to admit, I have not really researched Lemuria much. The only thing I do remember is that they were compared to Atlantis, and that, as you said, their collapse was not attributed to warfare in particular, but to natural causes that were not of their doing, I think.
Right.
Chloe, did you have any other sources you wanted to recommend, books or teachings on Atlantis wanted to recommend for viewers?
No, but I would just give more support towards the Convoluted Universe chapter on Atlantis, because truly it is much more detailed, and you do get the perspective from someone who was there. And so if you're interested in something like that, definitely check it out.
Yeah, I remember they talked quite a bit about crystal technology and its abuses. They talked quite a bit about creating life forms, these hybridized life forms of different animals that were kind of described as grotesque. They would put them into gladiator wars against each other or enslave them. And there was just a very negative attitude of arrogance and being better than others that, again, seems to affirm much of what we've read in Confederation channels. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at another couple passages? This is from Quo, and on September 7th, 2003, Quo said, "There are those within the circle that feel that they are Earth natives, that they have a love of Earth, an affinity for the Earth, and a long association with this particular planet that you call Earth, which we call Atlantis. Actually, this being the name of your planet, among the metaphysical or time-space entities which live within what you would call circular time and have experienced the entire gamut of the various experiences of your planet through what you would call your past and what you would call your future. The energy of your people is that energy that is called Atlantis, and at this time becomes more pointedly relevant, and that your peoples as a whole are visiting at this time and attempting to rebalance those energies of Atlantis, those energies that fed into the buildup of the civilization of Atlantis and of Egypt, the civilizations that learned technology and skills of the scientific kind and did not learn the disciplines of the personality that would enable them to make use of such technical expertise in a way that was positive and unconditionally loving." And on May 23rd, 1982, Latwii, another Confederation entity and a social memory complex, which is part of Quo, the questioner asked, "Are there any entities upon this planet presently who experienced the demise of Atlantis?" "I am Latwii, and my sister. There are many entities upon this planet which experienced that action. Indeed, almost every entity which was part of the population of that continent known in your history as Atlantis now resides upon your planet." Questioner: "And I'm assuming they're both of the positive and negative polarity?" "I am Latwii. In general, my sister, this is correct, although the greatest portion of your peoples have not yet chosen their polarity, but swing back and forth between the two, both upon the conscious and unconscious levels." Questioner: "Are there more entities who have chosen the positive polarity than there are who have chosen the negative polarity?" "I am Latwii. My sister, this is correct. The number of entities at this time who have chosen the positive polarity is quite small, considered in relation to the entire population of your planet. Yet this number far exceeds those entities who have chosen the negative polarity. The entities, however, who have chosen the negative polarity are more to be seen in the positions of power, shall we say, for this is the natural habitat, shall we say, of such a negative polarity." Questioner: "Then I'm assuming some of them are rulers today, or they're at least in government positions of power?" "I am Latwii. This is correct, my sister, and to this we would only add that many such entities are not publicly visible, though many are." Really fascinating passages, and there's so much to unpack in all of these. I just find it fascinating in the first passage that they're saying they refer to our planet as Atlantis in certain metaphysical realms because the energy of Atlantis is so much the energy of our planet, and what we're going through, it's actually called Atlantis. I find that really fascinating. And again, as we've said, the idea that we're reliving Atlantis right now to this very day, and that everyone who lived in Atlantis is already incarnated on this planet. And you could think of anyone in government positions and power in any party as being part of that. I would certainly think of any number of these billionaires, the billionaire class, who seem to be very service to self. Not surprising there either. But I suppose perhaps one of the most striking parts is that the greatest portion of your peoples have not chosen their polarity yet, but swing back and forth between the two. And that is something that seems to be very plain and obvious in our world as we look around. Heather, did you have any thoughts, reflections on anything from either of these passages?
Yeah, I think for sure we're pointing to, I believe where it was saying about that. Yeah, I think if you go up a little bit, your peoples as a whole visiting at this time are attempting to rebalance those energies of Atlantis. I really like that particular part of this because it does show that I would say these are the wanderers, right, that have come in to help to start, yeah, rebalancing. But when we're looking at kind of, again, the pattern, I call it the pattern of, Atlantis, Mars, Maldek. What I find so interesting is that, they thought that they were service to others. There was this belief system that, they were acting in service to others, but there were biases that were underlying, which actually had them more, had a greater percentage of service to self. So it's almost like they were fooling themselves.
I do find that fascinating, certainly in the parts where they mentioned that with Maldek and Mars too, I think, as well. And yeah, I mean, it's striking to me, again, at the time that we were recording this, the 2024 presidential elections are about 2 weeks away. And according to the polls that are shared by mainstream media, yeah, it seems to be fairly close between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And yeah, it still is surprising to me that not only are there so many people in the general population who support Trump for president, but within the Law of One community, I think it would be fair to say there are a lot of folks in the Law of One community who support this person, which to me is just astonishing. I cannot think of anyone who's more outwardly service to self than this person. I mean, he's constantly talking about himself. He's constantly lying and spreading falsehoods. He habitually incites violence against others. I just can't imagine anyone who's more service to self. And yet, for some reason, people support him. And yeah, not to pass judgment. I think it's just for each person to figure out, and maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? But to me, from my perspective, it ties in really well with this idea of people who think they're service to others or claim to be, and yet their actions are somehow not consistent with it. Anthony, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, no, I would just so go back to say that, that's probably why we are considered Atlantis in the Inner Planes, is because it really is true nowadays. How many people do we know that come home at night, they love their kids, they love their wife, and then they go off to the military and they kill other people? How many people do we know that have jobs in which they have the position of power and they fire people for reasons that only have to do with profit, but then come home and have a beer with their best friend and give them spiritual advice? We are just cutting someone off in traffic and flipping them off and turning around and telling our kids to have a good day at school. We as human beings, all of us, we have a tendency to not be as pure in our service as is needed in order to graduate. Hence why so many of us are repeating over and over again. It's just a hard thing, as Heather pointed out. We are very confused as a society where we think, for example, we truly as a society think that violence is a noble answer. And we see it in television, we see it in everything, our media. You even ask the most average person, hey, what do you think of Tony Soprano or any like mobster? They think, oh yeah, that guy is cool, man. I would love to meet that guy. It's like, really? He's like a serial killer. Or how many times do we glorify snipers for, they'll get on the news like, yeah, I have 30 kills. And they're like, yeah, I appreciate your service. Did you just thank a serial killer? And no one blinks an eye or thinks twice about this. But there's very few people that are walking a narrow path, like, and doing all the work all the time.
Yeah, well said. Good point. And even, folks who, like myself, consider ourselves to be like really genuinely service to others. And I still find myself being judgmental towards others who have different opinions on anything. And that's depolarizing to myself as well. So appreciate your perspective on that. Chloe, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yes, I have 2 points. I'll try to be brief on both. So as far as the political atmosphere and just like not really understanding how someone could see themselves as very positive, but then align with hateful rhetoric. And, it's kind of like, it's really close to me because my family's mostly Navajo and Hispanic, and yet we seem to be split 50-50 on. I feel like it's a catalyst Oh, can you guys hear me? It says my internet's unstable.
You're breaking up a little bit, but I think we got just about everything. Go for it. Keep going.
Okay, well, I feel like it's a catalyst to just accept that others think that way, and maybe it's not logical to us, but yeah. So that would be my first point, and my second point is just Anthony touched on the conscious reasons people have kind of not made the choice, and you know what I mean, like as far as polarization goes. And I just wanted to touch really quickly on the unconscious stuff going on that is contributing to that. Because on an unconscious level, we've been taught by society how to act and the right way to behave. And if you haven't done the unlearning, then a lot of people are like, okay, well, violence is okay if you're protecting what you love, and otherwise I'm so peaceful and that's fine. And you know, it's a lot of people don't question it at all. And so on an unconscious level, it just exists there for a lot of the population, where they're swinging back and forth in polarity, and they don't see that it's a swinging back and forth because it's just what we've been taught since we were born.
Yeah,
Unless you happen
for sure.
to have parents who are very positively oriented, who stay, I mean, I don't know. My upbringing was more chaotic and like what's okay and what's not okay. So I've had to do a lot of unlearning.
For sure. And I think all of us have. I mean, anyone who watches any TV, any movies can see that, yeah, we've really just been conditioned to see aggression as a natural way to solve problems. And there's all sorts of movies glorifying warriors, and there's very few movies, TV shows glorifying peacemakers. Just doesn't happen. So, but again, that's part of why we're doing this, to let folks know that it's not coincidence. This is part of a endless cycle of karma that we are given the opportunity to see if we can break again. And that's a real blessing and a joy to have that. Does anybody else have anything they wanted to say before we take a look at another topic on this? Well, I would like to talk a little bit about time laterals and space pirates. Everything up to now has been pretty ordinary and probably not that weird compared to what we're about to get into now. For those of you who are Law of One students who are not familiar with time laterals and space pirates, I think you're going to enjoy this. The first passage we're going to look at is from March 6th, 2005. And Quo said, "In attempting to graduate from third density to fourth, this planetary sphere has so often repeated a singular error that it has been unable to achieve a complete planetary graduation in a long time, much longer than has been experienced by most planetary spheres. It is an extreme enough and unusual enough occurrence that it has created what this instrument would call a time lateral, or a shunt. The train of planet Earth's people has sort of gone off on a sidetrack until it can bring itself together in love. Instead, repeatedly, it has brought itself together in fear. And this is not unusual, considering that we see upon your planetary sphere those who have, as those of Mars did, destroyed their planetary surface by war, and as those of Atlantis did, destroy their continent by misdirected crystal energy. The tendency, therefore, of this planet's people is to become wrapped in fear and cause an explosion of negative energy that is usually seen as war. This pattern has repeated itself through empire upon empire, and now those who have, in the past, been a part of this pattern have almost finished what they can do to gather together what this instrument would call Armageddon or Götterdämmerung. They have failed. We believe that we now see that this is so. Nevertheless, the thrashing of what this instrument would call the dragon's tail is yet mighty." So, for those who have not seen this before, time laterals are mentioned in quite a few channeling sessions, and we will probably do another episode just on time laterals and space pirates because there is so much fascinating, weird, freaky stuff to unpack in there. For now, suffice it to say that a time lateral is kind of like what they described as a shunt. It's as if the normal upward path of spiritual evolution for our planet, because we've had such a hard time choosing service to others or service to self, there has been created a sidetrack off to the side where they have apparently literally moved heaven and earth in order to give humanity more time to graduate, more time to figure out this choice between service to others or service to self before that sidetrack can rejoin the main track and continue. And I think I will let it go at that and see if our panelists have any thoughts on anything else here. Anthony, any thoughts, reflections on time laterals here?
Oh yeah. I've studied the time lateral as part of just reading through all the material several times, a lot of times that I've done it. And it can get kind of tricky because it's kind of like, what, a time lateral? Is football or something? But the one thing I really take away from it is that the council, the beings that look over us really care a lot about the entities here on Earth, and to the point where they're willing to go as far as they can to extend this third density. That's really what's taking place, is that we've already, in fourth density, as they talked about many times, ever since really the 2012, that was like the last portion of third density, and everything else after that point is pretty much fourth density after that. And in most civilizations where all of the souls are originated from that planet, they usually have a more harmonious type of situation. However, Earth being, as we've already discussed, a mixture of so many different, we talked about Maldek and Mars, but there are other planetary bodies who were not able to finish their third density, that they came to Earth. And for that reason, there's all these different layers of mind that are they're the same, but they're also unique, and they're not blending well together. And so the council realizes that, and instead of, in a sense of how we all may have thought, I know myself, reading about the harvest, that it would be like some solar flare event, and it would be like, one night type thing, and everyone gets split up into these kind of groupings and stuff, a typical type of, spiritual growth that you go through and you kind of experience these things, to more so of what Ra described, this 700-year process where, in this example here, this time lateral has been created in order to really isolate the planet from any outside influence completely, because the entities here on Earth have been, for lack of a better word, influenced so much from so many outside good and bad services that they need opportunity to really think about it on their own. And so that's kind of what has been experienced. And I think I remember reading somewhere where either we're at the end of it or we've already been rejoined with the main track. I remember reading something about like being almost like a holodeck in a sense that we're on with this time lateral.
I haven't seen that.
Well,
the last mention of time laterals I recall is, I don't know, more than 10 years ago. And I haven't heard anything like it rejoining yet.
Yeah, I found it. I'll send it to you. It's April 14th, 2007. They talk about it, and they talk about it in the form of a holodeck, and not that it is ending, but it'll be coming close to ending. So
close to ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know several folks in our group have kind of expressed curiosity in terms of what is the status of the time lateral and where are we at on that. And again, it's really, there's enough there. It has been mentioned more than a few times in different channeling sessions. It would be a worthy separate episode. Otherwise, for now, Chloe, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, just the thrashing of what this instrument would call the dragon's tail is yet mighty. Just felt like that was kind of poetic and a little reassuring that we've avoided the ultimate destruction of our planet, possibly, but that's how I interpreted it, at least, that we've avoided Armageddon and But yeah, the negative entities on the planet and the forces of the people who haven't chosen that are kind of adding to that energy too. It's just, we see a lot of war and hatred, and but that's not a sign of the end. It's just the, symptoms of the choosing, I guess.
Yeah, I think the visual of the thrashing of a dying dragon's tail is a really good visual that has been mentioned. I think they've used that visual more than a few times in other sessions. And it is a nice reminder that, yeah, it would appear that service to self entities, their power has peaked already, and that it is waning as Earth is already fourth density positive planet. Our friends have said the Earth is already vibrating fully in fourth density positive. It's just humanity that's kind of lagging behind. Again, because we still have this ongoing tug of war between the majority who want to polarize towards service to others or are kind of inclined that way already, versus a smaller but significant group of people who are in fact trying to graduate on the service to self path. And although the odds of the planet being blown up are a lot less than they were 10, 20 years ago, I wouldn't rule it out as a possibility. And that is still something that, for me, I think learning about the law of one made a big difference in that sense, because before this, I would have thought, well, nobody really wants to blow the planet up, right? I mean, we all do care about the planet, right? And then it's only after reading the law of one, I realized, oh, no, that's not actually the case. And no, in fact, there is a significant number of people that's really what they're hoping to do. If they cannot make the planet graduate to service to self, then yeah, they would love to blow the whole thing up again. It would be orgasmic for them. It's like, oh, okay. Well, that kind of changes how you look at things. Heather, any thoughts on anything here?
Yeah, just kind of bouncing off of what you just said there. I forget it. There's like another passage, maybe it's further down or maybe it's a different one that we read, but just that the negative entities or the negative influences on the planet, I would say they like holding Earth in this sort of frequency because, the longer that people don't choose,
Right.
the more they can, I would say, feed off the fear. So,
Right.
That's
the next passage. It's coming up.
Yeah. As for, I had a really good time researching time lateral coming into this podcast. Kind of looking at some of the stuff that Dolores Cannon had as well. She kind of really even talked about it almost like a thought dimension, like every thought can create a different timeline. And it really got me thinking that, oh, so, Earth is in fourth density. We're saying that, right? But there's all these different multiple timelines, that we could possibly go. So, what are we going to choose? And I feel like we have all of these catalysts, that we've been given as opportunities to choose. And so, yeah, so I like that it does, like we're saying, it comes back to thrashing of what this instrument would call the dragon's tail is yet mighty. So, yeah, it kind of, I think, gives us that feeling that we would hope that the choice is made to service to others.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed, which is a great segue, I would say, into our next passage. And I will warn our viewers in advance. This is a long passage. It's going to take a couple pages of reading, but I hope you will agree when we get through it that it was worth it. And it is already edited for brevity. So what you're going to see is already the shortened version of what I would otherwise have posted. This was from December 19th, 2005. Quo said, "For the most part, and for the great majority, your planetary population consists of those who have been imported from other failed third density planetary cycles. Many of those upon your planet, then, are those who have either destroyed their planet completely through acts of war using advanced technology, or are those who have, for one reason or another, been unable to finish out their normal cycles upon their native Earths. Therefore, you have adopted each other as a kind of mixed bag, shall we say, of many differing planetary origins. This means that you have the attempt to integrate many differing subconscious or archetypical systems of looking at and structuring information. You do not have a homogeneous population. You have a population that has enormous difficulty in communicating because of the great variety of those groups speak in terms of planetary origins among its tribe. Nevertheless, the entire gamble of Earth in third density was to see if such a polyglot group of entities could mold themselves into a tribe with all embracing planet Earth, all becoming aware of their true situation as regards the need to make a choice of service to others or service to self, and all having a great desire to restore or reconstitute the planet Earth, where there was a group karma, shall we say, to be balanced, as so many entities had been involved actively in previous planets where, by their own choices, the planet was damaged, as in the case of Mars, or completely destroyed, as in the case of Maldek. The first and perhaps the most disastrous of the experiments of rebuilding the tribe of Earth and creating or recreating a level of technology which was well remembered by many entities from previous planetary experiences was that of Atlantis. In this pattern's outworking, those within Atlantis came to power at a time when their technology had grown sufficiently to offer the opportunity for advanced applications such as crystal technology. These leaders, instead of embracing the ideals of service to others, embraced what can be perhaps called the path of conditional service. This is a path of service to self, which is heavily overlaid by the rhetoric of service to others. It is a situation which initially was innocent. Those involved did not see that rather than polarizing fully service to others, there was a good deal of rationalizing and sophistic thinking which justified exceptions to various rules of ethics and which involved infringing upon the free will of entities which were considered less valuable or intelligent than others. This pattern of exclusion and manipulation of entities considered as lesser is the initial point of departure from service to self's polarity. Because of these choices, eventually, those who had previously created disasters on other planetary spheres created the first disaster upon the sphere of Earth, sinking the continent known as Atlantis. The wise and the clever, that is, those polarized positively and those polarized negatively, managed to remove themselves to other continents in sufficient number that these energies never left your planetary vibration. And if you will examine your written history, you may see a pattern of empire, its building, its maintenance, and its eventual and inevitable destruction played out again and again. Into the pattern of this repetitive self-destructive behavior among the population of planet Earth came those who were watching for the opportunity to present itself to make use of this time lateral. For if entities such as your group are unable to clear the population of your planet from this lateral, there are ways in which the negatively oriented entities have every hope of keeping the time lateral viable. It would no longer be attached to the main track. That opportunity shall soon be closed. Nevertheless, those that believe that they are in the appropriate place for themselves could choose to remain not polarized, either positively or negatively, but simply as those who would remain on third density Earth as it reverts to late second density. These entities would no longer be enlivened by third density entities who had the power of free will that could make the choice of service to self or service to others. They would be instinctual, great ape type beings who look like you do because that is the genetic pool that now exists upon planet Earth. However, these entities would simply be slaves of a kind that spent their lives living a life much as you now experience it, a life without a good deal of variety, a life that is not concerned with coming into harmony as a planetary system, but is only concerned with the tribe of its family and its clan, with protecting the resources of that family and clan, and of defending that family and clan. What the fifth density entities, which you may call, as this instrument has jokingly done, space pirates, have in mind is simply to have a continuing harvest of food, that food being fear. You may see the creation of an atmosphere of fear in your governmental systems, in your present culture. Indeed, we find from this instrument's mind there have been several conversations concerning this precise point recently among those who sit within this circle. The goal, therefore, of those who wish to aid planet Earth at this time is firstly to express the situation of the choice, without concern for numbers, but only with concern for making an appropriate effort to, as this instrument would say, get the word out globally, to share the information of the Confederation as regards this being the density of choice, and there being time yet for making that choice. A secondary effort at this time, but one which will grow increasingly stronger, and which will, within the next several of your years, become more important by far than alerting the population of this planet, is the concern for the planet itself. For there are many, many entities upon this planet whose route or road to realization of their true situation involves becoming aware of and responsive to the sad plight of the planet itself and the fact that your culture and your way of life are gradually destroying the viability of this planet. The desire to change this pattern is a key to the activation of the will to choose in many entities whose energies are unconsciously but deeply involved with connecting with restitution and the energies of stewardship and unconditional love, not so much to the people of the planet as to the planet itself. We realize that gazing at this situation, there is the possibility of creating within oneself an easy and seductive anger, or even rage. We would encourage each of you to take this entire situation lightly, to let it slide off your back. This is not a burden for you to pick up. This is not something for which you can be responsible or over which you have any control. You are those who stand as guardians and anchors of light, holding that bridge open, and by your vibrations and your thoughts, radiating the love and the light of the infinite creator with your own coloration out into the ambient atmosphere. You are an agent of infection. You are infecting people with the highest and the best of your love. Witness your opportunity to offer that love. It's such a beautiful passage, and as you can see, all the stuff that I put in blue, I couldn't find anything to cut from here. It all seemed really important. And for folks who, again, are trying to understand why the world is as wonky and crazy as it is, for me, this was a really big revelation in being able to understand why there's so much war, why there's so much craziness, why people are acting the way they are. And there's this part about, our population being made up of inhabitants from other planets that blew themselves up. I always laugh when I see this because it reminds me of the scene in the second Men in Black movie, if you guys have seen it, where the Tommy Lee Jones character, his memory's been wiped out and he's been working in a post office for some years now. And the Will Smith character has to go back to the post office to bring him back into Men in Black to help save the world again. And there's that scene where they go into the back office of the post room, and like everyone who works in the post office like takes off their mask and reveals that there's some freaky looking alien from another planet. And it's like, think of that. Next time you see people acting like they're from another planet or something, realize that, oh, they really are from another planet. And that explains so much of what's going on in the world. Otherwise, yeah, I think the two takeaway lessons from this long passage are: one, let people know that there is a choice. And if you were not aware of that before discovering the law, wouldn't realize that that is kind of your reason for being here in third density, to make that choice of being of service to others, thinking of others at least a little bit more than yourself, and dedicating your life to unconditional love for all, or make the choice to dedicate to path of service to self and just don't think of anybody else more than 5% of your waking hours, and you can graduate either way. But the point is to make a choice and to try to commit to it and not be stuck in this back and forth thing as so many people seem to be. And then lastly, to care for the planet itself. It's a really beautiful thing that I would hope most everybody who's not on the service to self path can relate to this love and care for our planet. Heather or Chloe, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yes. I just really just wanted to say first, loved your Men in Black reference. Felt like it's very suitable for this conversation.
Anything to bring pop culture in.
Yeah.
Always try to bring pop culture in. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah. I no, you're good. This is just like when I first read this passage before we recorded, like it's very emotional for me. Like, okay, because it goes through all that stuff, and it's like, okay, that makes sense. There's a lot of people here from planets or places where they destroyed it or made it uninhabitable. So that makes a lot of sense. But then they get to the sad plight of the Earth, and I basically started. I do feel so much for this planet, like this conscious being that has been so that has taken care of us so well and provided so much, and feel that as a planetary group we have taken her for granted. And one of my dreams, something I will do eventually, is I really want to visit all the chakra points on the planet and just give her Reiki and just offer that service. And won't really get much from it besides offering that, but I've always felt really called to do that, and felt like passages like this just reinforce following my intuition, that it is probably important, at least for my growth, if nothing else.
What a beautiful thing that would be. Yeah.
Uh,
I hope you can do that. Yeah. Heather, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, I just a couple reflections. Going back to the part where they talk about nevertheless, those that believe that they are in the appropriate place for themselves could choose to remain not polarized either positively or negatively, but simply as those who would remain on third density Earth as it reverts to late second density. And then it goes on to talk about how they would revert back to instinctual great ape type beings who would look like us or humans, because that is the genetic pool that now exists. But the kind that spent their lives living a life much as you now experience it. Like, that is just like, I don't know, mind blowing to me.
It is. Tell me what you think about that. Talk about it.
Well, I think first, it kind of, if we think about maybe like what Earth was like actually, in late second density, where you had tribes, then we can kind of see how I would say in the roots of the mind, those tribal instincts still exist. So that's kind of where like maybe our biases are held, right? Like we think, oh, I would fight for my family. I would, I don't harm anything, but I would fight for my family. But and that's kind of, I think, comes from those tribal instincts. So I guess I just really feel like it points to I guess the possibility for Earth if we choose not to choose. Right?
Yeah.
If we choose not to choose, then it's interesting though, then they're also saying that it would be like second density Earth when we know that Earth is in fourth density. So does that mean it's like Earth is in there's a different timeline, right? That Earth would be following where it would be, second density. So it's really where
The impression I got was that the hope of the space pirates, again, they know that they cannot make the planet graduate fourth density negative. It's just not there. So the best they can do is either prevent it from graduating fourth density positive or delay it as long as possible. And what I think they're describing here is basically, instead of allowing the time lateral to rejoin the main track and continue, they want to keep the time lateral separate and just keep us in this limbo situation forever. Whereas they're saying it would describe people as just kind of reverting back to their second density great ape ancestors, where, as you described it so well, it's really not that different from life that they're experiencing now, where it's just constant warfare and people have no idea of what's going on, and they're just basically slaves and providing fear as food for these space pirates.
Right. And then I do love how they talk about, well, we have these two different ways to serve, at the end. The desire to change this pattern is a key to the activation of the will to choose in many entities whose energies are unconsciously but deeply involved in connecting with the restitution and the energies of stewardship and unconditional love, not so much for the people, but of the planet. So yeah, I just, it's so beautifully stated. And I think, we all have, I think those who are probably into the raw material and the law of one all feel a very strong connection with the earth, and really feel the vibration of the earth, and hope that we do all that we can to help it in its progress. So yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I think many who interact with younger generations or with children would say, yeah, there is something that seems to affirm what we have heard in terms of them being described as indigo children and as entities who did already graduate to fourth density, but came back here specifically to help the planet in order to help with this. And I have seen that quite a bit in younger folks, and that's really encouraging to see. Anthony, anything to add?
Just piggybacking on what Heather had said about the previous passage and the second density and kind of what the space pirates are looking to do. It really reminds me almost in a sense of the Matrix, right? Of these negative entities locking us into, I guess it was 1990s, that there were it never got past that time period. Like even Mr. Smith said, like, this is the, we figured out this was the height of your civilization. And so they had literally been living, or Earth had been living in this, the 90s for hundreds of years, it seemed like, based on the way they described it. And so I can, to maybe add a little bit of coloration to that. And last thing I'll say is, all of this, for me, it really supports, or it helps me better be in that mind state of service to others, because when I look out on the news and I see all of the bellicosity, just like Jonathan said, to know kind of the cause of it gives you kind of a reason to say, I forgive them. This is not only the first, but second or third time. It's almost like if you were to go to a 12-year-old kid who's still in the third grade and look at him worse or lesser because he couldn't get past the third grade, you actually would feel an overwhelming, at least myself would feel a desire to maybe spend more time with that person and actually love that person more than the kids that had necessarily gone to the third and fourth, fifth grade. And these are the Trumps and the what's the other person's name? I don't do politics. I'm sorry. Harris, yeah, our vice president, Harris and Trump, and I see all these different people arguing back and forth and having all these sides and things on both sides. It's like you just gotta love them because they're just 3D repeaters. They just have done this so many times. It's hard for them to otherwise. It's like the difference. Last thing, it's like the difference between in the zombie movie where your friend's running to the door behind the zombies, and someone of service would leave the door open. Maybe a zombie gets in. Maybe I lose an arm. I'm gonna leave that door open, right? And then there's other people that would slam the door, run in the corner and hide, right? And listen to their friends get eat up. And how many people do we know would be, the person that would hide in the corner? A lot of people would be, right? And very few people would even leave the door open. They would actually, are you stupid? Why would you do that? And so that's the kind of level of service that we got to be striving for, in my opinion, to be the people that hold that door open when we see that person running towards us, even if we might get ourselves hurt.
Way to bang out those pop culture references, my friend. That's good. Yeah, no, I love it. Well, and I appreciate you bringing it up because it reminds me of something that I think you said a little while back, Anthony. Heather was talking about this part about our great ape ancestors. And this is, again, something that has come up quite a few times in channeling transcripts where they talk about our tribal instincts because it is part of our DNA that we are concerned with our tribe and our family and our clan and protecting the resources of that family and clan, defending the family and the clan. And that I would say that's probably another good example of folks who are kind of wavering in their polarization because they care about others in the sense of their own family or their own friends or their own clan. It's just the other folks that they don't really care so much about. Or are willing to sacrifice or willing to do unkind things to them. Particularly those who might be described as conservative Christians. They would certainly seem to be considering themselves service to others, but boy, the things that they do towards folks who they would see as non-believers or not worthy is definitely unkind. And I think that is the big challenge for anyone to graduate from service to others. Fourth density is the unconditional love. It means loving others, not just the ones that you already like or the ones who are already part of your family, but being able to love the people you fucking hate the most or find the most loathsome. That is something I'm still struggling with, and I think many people are struggling with. But I think that, as you said, Anthony, once you know that that's how it works, well, then it changes everything. It gives you something to shoot for and gives you something to strive for. Anybody have any other thoughts on anything from this passage before we look at another passage? Let's go ahead and look at the future. I have two passages here that I think might give folks some inspiration and hope for the future. On April 27th, 2006, Quo said, "It is impossible for us to predict with any certainty what shall occur in your future. The energies that are vibrating in your Earth world at this time are muddied and unclear. There is, not unexpectedly, a certain amount of energy coming from those who are negatively polarized and who realize that their time is gone. They have nothing more to conquer. They have no way to control more than they have already controlled, except to repeat patterns of ancient misconduct and to literally blow up their world. Those who are in positions of power on what you call Mars, Maldek, and Atlantis have once again surfaced and attempted to complete that pattern of destruction. For the most part, they are acting out of old instinct, repeating patterns of empire and destruction that have not served them in the past and do not serve them now, yet they persist. Working against this energy is a tremendous awakening and outpouring of those who are polarized service to others. Again, in many cases, these energies are instinctual and unconscious, but the fruits of incarnation after incarnation of loving and serving and being faithful are coming home to roost. And my friends, we cannot tell you how beautiful is the sight of so many awakening souls that are blooming very quickly and are acquiring a great deal of polarity as they strive with all their hearts to love and serve the one infinite Creator as best they know how. Intention is everything. And there is one other passage I wanted to look at. This is from July 31st, 2007. Quo said, "Indeed, we especially encourage you in your stewardship of the earth, for there is a tremendous amount of what this instrument would call group karma having to do with the fact that so many of those who are attempting to graduate from third density on planet Earth have in the past on Sirius, Deneb, Mars, Maldek, or Atlantis destroyed their environments. There is great heart sadness amongst the entire human tribe concerning the destruction of Mother Earth, and it is very healing in your energy patterns as a people, wherever you live, to become involved in loving and serving your beautiful, fragile island home." Really love those passages, and I think much of what they said here are things that we have already said. Um, I would only add one more pop culture reference, and that is one of my all-time favorite movies, which is Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. I've mentioned it many times in our study group, and in this context, I think it's a great example of how, again, everyone who's on planet Earth at this time fought tooth and nail for the privilege to be here at this time, because we are told there are many, many, many more souls that want to be here for this opportunity than there are physical bodies for them to be in. So whoever is on this planet at this time was given this opportunity because presumably they have the highest probability of either graduating for the first time or of being able to help others graduate if they are here as wanderers assisting. But for those who have not graduated, for those who have come from planets that destroyed themselves over and over and over again, and probably were incarnated here during Atlantis, were probably here during the Roman Empire, might have been here during Nazi Germany or whatever. Once again, you're being given an opportunity, each of us are being given opportunities to see if we can make different decisions this time, better choices that are more polarized, let's say, towards service to others. And that would be the key to breaking these endless karmic cycles of violence and war and destruction, much like in how Groundhog Day, when the Bill Murray character finally stopped thinking of himself only and actually started thinking of others. That's when he was able to break the curse and break the cycle and move forward in his evolution. The movie is a lot funnier than the way I just described it, but that wasn't the point. The point is the plot points there. Otherwise, Chloe, Heather, any thoughts, reflections on either of these two passages?
I'll just say the first thing that stuck out to me here is where they say intention is everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, it really is. And I think once you try to align from the heart space, you work to expand your heart, and you can move through this incarnation with as much intention as possible. That's gonna assist in polarizing not only you but others as well. I think it's interesting in the next passage there how they talk about Sirius and Deneb. So those are the other planetary systems that they talk about that clearly destroyed themselves. Like I do know from galactic history that Sirius, was a triplanetary system, A, B, and C, and there was a great war on one of those. Which yeah, and I'm not as familiar with Deneb, but I think they're just giving us more of the pattern, right? Like, so yeah, it goes even further back. But I do love the fact that it does say, like, hey, like, you guys are here, you're doing it, right? Like, let's do this, let's change this vibration. And yeah, so yeah, I love it.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Kind of calls back to something that was in one of the other passages where they were saying, don't take this lightly, let it slide off your back. This is not your battle to fight. You don't have any control over it. Just be loving. You are here to express the love of the Creator as you know best, and to do that in a way that lightens the vibrations for our planet, and is really probably the best hope that any of us can have. Anthony, any thoughts to add?
Yeah, I was wanting to point out where you're talking about standing in line, how we all did our best to get here. And one of the reasons I've kind of come to the conclusion of that is like what Ross said in giving advice of one of the exercises, is to see love in the moment. And if you really try your darndest with the real intention to do that, you start to realize how freaking hard it is. When you have, especially if you're in relationships with people that are close, like a wife or your children, and you see how there are opportunities where you're angry or you're frustrated, and you have to see, as I mentioned in one of our weekend sessions, when you see anger, seeing the compassion; when you're seeing frustration, seeing the opposite of frustration. Seeing those things in the moment and bringing those things forth. is where the opportunity is, because as going back to what I said before, our society glorifies violence and makes it look as if though all these things are right, and we are bred up to think that the world and the universe is working against us. So everything that happens to us, even though these catalysts is really, from an objective perspective, they're neutral, we tend to, our automatic response to it is, this thing again, my wife's telling me about the socks again, the kids forgot their homework, the boss makes me work extra on the weekend, as opposed to what they teach us is, this is, my wife's upset, maybe I need to do a better job with the socks. I can see how that makes her upset. Or my kids, they're young and there's all these distractions that are going on. I can see why they may have forgotten their homework. Or, the third thing that I said, and changing it with love, right? These things, and to do it in every single moment, right? That's where they talk about that adept path becomes every single moment. Every thought you have, you're like, okay, was that a positive or a negative thought? And if it's a positive thought, you're balancing it. And you're constantly doing this all the time. And that's why the opportunity is so great, because when we awaken to that, we realize that every moment, as they say in Zen, practice is limitless. It goes on forever. There's everything from, the birds, the trees, to your wife, and this conversation here.
So beautifully said. Yeah, really, really appreciate it. And again, it's such a great reminder that that's why each of us came here, that there's spiritual growth that can happen here in the turmoil and confusion of third density that would take thousands or millions of years at the higher densities. So all the crazy stuff that drives us nuts and all of those conflicts that you're talking about that we all experience in one way or another, it's great stuff. It's what we came here for. And it'll probably make more sense after we leave the incarnation. Chloe, did you have anything to add? Any thoughts, reflections?
Yes, just wanted to start by saying, Anthony and Heather, your thoughts on this. I very much agree with what you're saying, and just really am happy that I'm here with you guys right now doing this podcast. So just the tales of Atlantis and Mars and Maldek, and just kind of, if you're a skeptic, then it's a cautionary tale. And if you know it to be true, then there's a lot to learn and a ton of energies that need to be balanced within ourselves and our society. And just the best thing I think anyone can do is just try to be a beacon of light and love in your own life and for the people who see you every day. And if we can all do that across the planet, then eventually the whole planet will be bathed in that light. And I think there's a really good opportunity here for us to, I feel it, like that energy's building in groups like this. And yeah, so just thank you again for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah. And just to imagine that we all might have been together in Atlantis also, and we're coming back again to do it again, and maybe better than we did last time. We shall see. And this is where a smart podcast host would end the episode and say that that's it. But there is one other thing, topic I wanted to get into, because it's really too good to pass up, and that is the matter of our cetacean friends. Cetaceans, of course, being dolphins, whales, porpoises. You may or may not remember, but yes, on this density slide that I have shown in previous episodes, did note that humans and cetaceans are both considered third density entities, but the cetaceans has a little bit of an asterisk next to it, because apparently the evolution of cetaceans was influenced by our Atlantean friends. And for anyone who's interested in whales and dolphins, you might find this interesting and worth learning. On January 20th, 2009, Quo said, "Just as your species had its evolution interrupted by genetic manipulation many thousands of your years in the past, so has the evolution of those known to you as dolphins and whales and other cetaceans, such as porpoises, been interrupted. Not by those from elsewhere than your planet, by those on the island continent you have called Atlantis. The consciousness of these mammals was enhanced by genetic manipulation, which caused the so-called human and the so-called cetacean to be bonded and blended and unified into that which had every appearance of being a cetacean, yet that which now possessed a spirit complex of third density level. Thusly, the natural process of reproduction gradually invested all of these species with third density consciousness. Consequently, you and the whales and the dolphins are indeed brothers, moving through the third density major cycle of 76,000 or so of your years. Perhaps we may say that the best way to learn from the cetaceans of your planet is to imagine how you might experience third density if your field of endeavor were limited to those activities which could be accomplished without the use of hands with the opposable thumbs, which the one known as T mentioned in his query. What would it be like to have a long life in which there were no jobs necessary in order to pay bills, where there were no resources to guard or territory to defend? How would your life be different if you were free to choose what dreams and visions with which you wish to occupy yourself, what meditations in which you wish to encompass yourself, what contemplation you wish to enjoy, not only for an hour or a few minutes, but also for all your waking hours for an entire life? If your joy was the dance of harmony with the elements, the dance of fellowship with those of your kind, and the dance of the mated family with the mated parents' children, how would you be different than you are today? How would the environment of leisure and ease and rhythm affect you? How would the lack of necessity for creating and using tools affect you? It is clear that the changes would be profound, for in most human lives, the pace of life revolves around the necessity of doing some sort of useful work. That is, useful as determined by those who would hire you to do that work in order to barter your time for the emolument received. This emolument is necessary so that you may buy for you and your family food to eat, a roof over your heads, warmth in the winter, coolness in the summer, and clothing to create a modest appearance and cover the bareness of your physical form. There are many gadgets which your people find necessary or desirable. These too must be purchased with the money made from your work. Only a very few humans are able to go through their incarnations without their consciousness being saturated with the hurry and the clangor of what this instrument would call the daily grind. That which you eat must be prepared, and then after it is eaten, the detritus must be cleared away, and this takes your time. The roof which is over your head must be maintained. The soil, dust, and other untidiness must be swept and dusted and scrubbed. Unless you live in my house, we don't bother doing any of that stuff. Indeed, even your natural environment, which you call your lawn, has come to be that which must be maintained and not allowed to grow naturally. And so more time, more energy, more of your money are spent in creating for yourself the atmosphere that you prefer. Your world is full of limits. On this side is your property, on the other someone else's. In your closet are your clothes, not someone else's. You spend a good deal of your time amassing your stockpile of useful and desirable items, and these too must be maintained. Batteries need charging, power cords must be found, the list goes on and on. This is in stark contrast to your brothers and sisters who are able to ride freely through the ever-changing waters where food is plentiful and is found with no discernible effort, where all waters are acceptable in temperature, where there is no money to make and there are no goods to buy. There is nothing to store up against a harsh winter or old age. There is only the air to breathe, the water in which to swim, companionship, and the dreams, meditations, and contemplations of all the years of life. What can you learn from the contemplation of these differences, my brother? It was the choice of those Atlanteans who volunteered for the experiments in genetics to choose these beautiful animals. The politics of their home in Atlantis seemed to them to be questionable in polarity. And so it seemed desirable to them, therefore, to use their technology to embark upon a great adventure. These then who swim the seas of your time are the descendants of the philosophers and sages who saw a better way to move through the spiritual evolution of third density, choosing not so much service to others as a refusal to live in service to self. This is a callback to what we talked about before, where it was said that Atlanteans had learned to use intelligent energy to create new life forms. Again, something that's discussed quite a bit in the Dolores Cannon work. But here, if I'm understanding correctly, there were positively oriented Atlanteans who, rather than fleeing to Peru or to Tibet or to Turkey, decided basically to genetically merge consciousness with cetaceans, and therefore became what we now regard as whales and dolphins, and live a life as described in this passage. I unfortunately did not include the part where there was a question that was asked about whether cetaceans could be of assist, whether we could learn from cetaceans and how to solve all of these problems of war and bellicosity that we've seen from Mars and Atlantis. And Quo basically said, they really can't, mainly because they don't have opposable thumbs. They really don't have the capacity to do anything really other than drift along in the infinite sea and do what whales and dolphins do. But I guess that is part of the reason that we chose to incarnate in these bodies with opposable thumbs, so that we can, in fact, do whatever it is that we're doing on land to help clear up the karma of Maldek and Mars and Atlantis and all those other civilizations. So it is the great adventure that we have all chosen to embark on, apparently. Any thoughts, reflections on this, Anthony? Anything here?
Yeah, I would just say it always, my imagination always gets going, because when you think about kind of Atlantis and stuff, they supposedly had the same, or not same, but they had the same kind of culture, but the technology was greater. So I could imagine, like, on whatever communication device they got, little advertisements about, joining your brain with, the dolphins, get a discount on the weekend or something like that. Come on down there and get that done. Because the thing about it is that we are supposedly, much more spiritually evolved in a sense than they were at the time, and so I can only imagine that, currency and, bartering and trading was definitely going on, along with the ability to use crystals and have like unlimited energy. I could only imagine what type of technology and games and things that they were doing. So I just always put it kind of in that context of, like, I could see them having commercials and different things like that.
Oh my God, I never thought of that. Yeah, wow. That would be great TV material.
Interesting.
Chloe, anything to add?
Yeah, I'm just so glad that you included these passages. Sorry about that noise. My cat just threw something. So, just I was really interested in how cetaceans were at all third density. Like, I know it's mentioned in the Law of One, but it's not as specific that I remember as these LNL, like these other LNL channelings are. And just doing a quick visualization of what it would be like to be a third density creature who was in the ocean and not paying bills and not worrying about, like, where am I going to sleep? What am I going to eat? How do I keep my job? How do I get more money? Like, and honestly, I can see where those Atlanteans were coming from, and just seeing, like, a world of opportunity and freedom. And I personally very much prefer this body that I'm in right now, but I might lend a lot more visualization, meditation time to just picturing what it would be like to be a third density creature in the ocean. And I have a very high affinity with water, so yeah, it just seems
Yeah.
really nice. And thank you for including these passages. I learned a lot.
Yeah, I'm glad so. Like I said, we probably could have ended before this and would have been fine and nobody would have known any different. But yeah, I thought this would be something of interest. And I'm sure there are a lot of
I'm
people
glad
who
you
would
kept
wish
going.
they could reincarnate as a dolphin instead of a human. Seems like it would be a lot easier. Yeah. Heather, any thoughts, reflections to add?
Yeah, I just I think it's interesting when they're talking about genetic manipulation. I think that's something that's been done, throughout, I would say, the evolution of species. So interesting here, like with the dolphins and the cetaceans, it's like it went right. But I think that there have been, I think they said on Maldek, they used this form of genetic manipulation, and that is part of what contributed to the destruction of the planet. And then we see, well, not only from this, but from the Dolores Cannon work, it's where like the idea of the centaurs and the mermaids come from. But so how they were using intelligent energy in a negatively polarized manner, and basically lended itself to ending the species or the planetary sphere.
Yeah.
So I think when I kind of get my mind going, I think that we need to like look as humans, like on Earth right now, what would genetic manipulation look like, moving forward? Like, where do we see that happening, with maybe with AI, maybe with, scientists doing, some sort of, genetic manipulation. But it's interesting to think that that has been, I would say, one of the downfalls of many civilizations.
For sure. Yeah, and it was something I remember they did spell out specifically these technological advancements without the ability to learn how to love is was a big source of the problem for these previous worlds, as is clearly the problem for Earth people now.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any other thoughts on anything here before we wrap things up here?
You should look at Flipper different, huh? Remember the TV show?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
I think there were some instances where I don't know if you guys are familiar with the radio show The Metaphysical Hour that Dolores Cannon was running for quite a while. There's a huge archive on YouTube, but in many of these episodes, well, I guess maybe I can think of like 4 instances where she mentions uh, advancements in science and genetic experiments and like manipulating DNA. And she would mention how this could be related to like repeating the Atlantis cycle, that scientists are manipulating the genetics and DNA without really considering like, should we be doing it? Is this like positively oriented or not? And that's just connected to what you guys were saying.
Yeah, it seems most of the technological advancements are very service to self. I mean, they will use the rhetoric of service to others and talk about how it can be helpful to others, but I think anyone who's been paying attention knows that it all comes down to money, and that is the reason they're doing it, for money and for profit, and to make a few really rich people a whole lot richer. I would say this would be a great time to get into the part of the episode that we call Where Do We Go From Here? After looking at everything that we've talked about for the last almost 2 hours now, what are some takeaway lessons perhaps we might remember for this? Here's 5 things that I think might be worth remembering. 1, if nothing else, Atlantis is a thing of the present and not the past. If you were not aware of this before, then knowing that Atlantis was a real place, and that what happened there, as well as on Maldek and as well on Mars, explains so much of what we're seeing today, I think would make a big difference in how you look at how you move through the world of today. And that, again, the whole idea that bellicosity, war, aggressive male energy imbalances is probably nothing new. pretty sure everyone is well aware that it's a problem, but now you have an understanding of why it's a problem, that this is something that goes back to thousands and millions of years ago on previous planets, and that now we live on Earth, which is, as Carla described it, she referred to Earth as a reform school. It's a place where everyone from other planets that got kicked out of other planets, that destroyed their own planets, has been put on planet Earth to see if we can figure out how to make this work, and has been given, again, one more chance to see if they can graduate. And if we as a collective can graduate. And again, a lot of that really comes down to being aware that there is a choice to be made. Third density is referred to as the density of choice, because the whole point of your life and existence in this world and this reality as we know it is to make a choice of service to others or service to self. Either think about others at least as much as you think about yourself, or just don't think about anybody ever at all. Either way is considered acceptable, because either way you're acknowledging either the creator in other selves, or you're acknowledging the creator in yourself and dedicating yourself to either of those. But make a choice one way or the other and commit to that choice as much as you can. And lastly, care for the planet. If nothing else, just to remember that we all came here because we love this planet and because we want it to become the planet that it was destined to be. Earth always strikes me as like the Hawaii of the universe, just as Hawaii is like a beautiful tropical paradise on Earth. Earth, I imagine, is kind of like the Hawaii of the universe. It's a tropical paradise, and it's such a beautiful place, and it's why so many of us have chosen to come here, because we love it and we want it to become all she can be. Panelists, any thoughts, reflections on any of this? Want to add before we have a little pop quiz? All right. Well, again, I really want to thank you all for being here. It's been a wonderful conversation, and we are going to bring one more little pop culture reference in here. For those of you who know, pop quiz was a phrase that Carla used to use often to refer to the little tests that we get in our daily lives to see if we have indeed learned the lessons that we came here to incarnate. Here, we just like to do pop quizzes to add a little bit of fun and levity to our otherwise serious conversations and bring in a little pop culture to our metaphysical conversations. So, panelists, we did spend a fair bit of time today talking about space pirates, so it seems only fitting to quiz you on one of the most popular and profitable movie franchises of the last 20 years, and that is, of course, the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. There's been 5 of them, apparently. I think I saw the first 3, and then I kind of like lost interest after that. Has anybody seen any or all of these movies?
I have. I've seen 2 of them.
2 of them. First 2? Last 2?
Yeah, first 2.
First 2. Yeah, the first 2 were great. Heather, Anthony, have you seen any of these?
I think I've seen maybe 2 of them. Yeah, I would say maybe the first 2.
Nice. Anthony?
I think I've seen the Curse of the Black Pearl and the Dead Man's Chest, those 2 on the left.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any other ones.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I'm going to ask you 3 multiple choice questions about Pirates of the Caribbean. See how many you can guess correctly. Those of you who are watching on video, you can go ahead and say your answers out loud, and we can hear you through the screen. And as always, the points don't matter. If you had fun, you won. If you learned something interesting about these movies that you can drop into a conversation later with friends or family, then you won as well. So your first question is, who, instead of Johnny Depp, was the movie producer's top choice to play Jack Sparrow? Was it A, Jim Carrey, B, Cary Elwes, or C, Hugh Jackman? What do you think? Panelists, you can just go ahead, unmute your mics, and just say your answers out loud.
I'm going to guess A.
A's a good guess. What do you think, Anthony?
I would go with C.
C is a good guess. Chloe?
C.
Ooh, nice, nice. The correct answer is, in fact, C. Hugh Jackman was the producer's top choice to play Jack Sparrow, but Disney wouldn't allow them to cast him because they didn't think he was a big enough star at that particular time. Jim Carrey was in fact offered the role, but he turned it down to make Bruce Almighty instead. Carrie Elwes, of course, was from The Princess Bride, who would have made a hilarious Jack Sparrow. But Carrie Elwes, Michael Keaton, Steve Martin, Matthew McConaughey, Bill Murray, Christopher Walken, and Robin Williams were all considered for the part of Jack Sparrow before it was offered to Johnny Depp. Always funny to think about that. I mean, it's really hard to imagine anybody other than Johnny Depp as that character. And can you imagine how different the movie would have been if Jim Carrey was Jack Sparrow, or Robin Williams was Jack Sparrow, or Hugh Jackman? Interestingly, I'm having a hard time imagining those. Just hilarious. Are you ready for your second question? Second question. How old was actress Keira Knightley in Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, the first movie? Was she A, 17, B, 18, or C, 19? What do you think?
I'll go with C.
C?
C is good guess.
I'll go with B.
B is good guess. Anthony, did you say C also?
I said C.
Nice. All good guesses. The correct answer is, in fact, correct answer is, in fact, A. She was only 17 at the time of shooting the first movie, and because she was a minor, her mother had to accompany her to all of the shooting locations. Interesting. She was basically a high school junior. Can you believe that at that age? That is just amazing.
Not really.
What's that, Chloe? Didn't catch.
Oh, I said I can't really believe that. She definitely comes off as older. So yeah, crazy.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think she declined to continue the role after the third movie because apparently, and I only found this out in writing the pop quiz, she really was a tomboy growing up. She identified really as a tomboy, and she felt super uncomfortable playing this object of lust for so many men and others in the movie. She just didn't feel comfortable doing that. So declined to continue in that role. But she's been a great actress and has played many other great roles in many other great movies. Your last question. Which of the following actors was offered the role of Barbossa before Geoffrey Rush? Was it A, Robert De Niro, B, Ian McKellen, or C, Michael Caine?
Go with A.
B.
I'll go with A.
A is good guess. B is good guess. Anybody going for C? Oh. The correct answer is, in fact, A. Robert De Niro was offered the role, but he reportedly turned it down, assuming the movie would flop, which had been the case for pirate movies for decades. Apparently, he later regretted this and took the role of Captain Shakespeare in the movie Stardust, which flopped miserably, and I don't think anybody's ever heard of it. Ian McKellen, of course, is famous for his role in The Lord of the Rings and the X-Men movies. Michael Caine, of course, has been a standout in supporting roles in so many movies, including the Dark Knight trilogy, Interstellar, Inception, and those are just the movies that were directed by Christopher Nolan. Fun fact about Michael Caine, his name sounds just like my cocaine if you say it in Michael Caine's voice. You can try that on your own or try it off camera, but my cocaine, yeah, sounds just like it. Yes, and if you didn't learn anything else valuable from this podcast episode, at least you learned that much. Panelists, it has been a joy and a privilege as always hanging out with you. I want to thank you for your learned teachings and teach learnings. Anybody have any last goodbyes they want to say before we part ways? Anybody?
I just want to say it was super fun
Yeah,
researching this topic with y'all. Yeah, super interesting to get to, dive into Atlantis, time laterals, space pirates. So yeah, great connecting with you guys.
Likewise. Likewise. Anthony, Chloe?
You're muted.
Yeah, I just really glad you guys are here with me today, and I also feel like I learned a lot and really enjoyed sharing this energy. Anthony was gonna say something.
Yeah, sorry about the mute thing. You think I would get it by now? But thank everyone. I just want to say I had a really great time, and I love everyone, and I hope everyone continues studying and learns and grows from the material.
Indeed. As always, I learned a lot from you guys, and I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope our viewers do too. Panelists, want to thank you for everything you've done and continue to do in service to others. To all our friends at L&L Research, want to thank you for all you've done, continue to do to us in service to others. For everyone watching this video at some time in the near or distant future, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others and in service to this beautiful planet. We're sending you our love, and we can feel yours in return. Until next time, in the love and light of the one infinite creator, Adonai, namaste. See you soon.